With the 50th anniversary of the James Bond franchise in 2012, casual moviegoers and hardcore fans alike were able to celebrate with the release of Skyfall, the 23rd film in the series. Daniel Craig reunited with Academy Award-winning director Sam Mendes to bring a film that continued the emotional storytelling that writers Neil Purvis and Robert Wade had been giving us since The World Is Not Enough, whilst giving a spectacular return to form after the jumbled mess that was Quantum of Solace. I know that this Bond film is probably one with the most video essays on it, but I will try to do something different by focusing less on the themes and Bond himself, but just on the female characters. Whilst a few of the more recent entries in the series deconstruct some of the key Bond tropes to keep the franchise fresh and exciting, one of the most interesting is the way that women are portrayed, to the extent that they do an entire bait and switch on the audience. I even believe that this is the most interesting subversion of the audience's expectations since Fiona Volpe and Electra King. Hello and welcome to Enchanted Essays. I post new reviews and video essays every Friday, so feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. I'm planning more Bond videos for September, so make sure you do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're the first to be notified when I finally post them. Anyway, according to Roald Dahl, who wrote the screenplay for You Only Live Twice, he was given free rein to adapt Fleming's book on the condition that he included 3 women. The main sidekick that ends up with Bond at the end of the movie, the sacrificial lamb, possibly because of the success of both Jill and Tilly Masterson in Goldfinger, and a femme fatale, most certainly due to the success of Fiona Volpe from their last entry, Thunderball. Whilst there are plenty of films that don't necessarily fill out that formula, these are still recognised as staples of female characters in the franchise. Another thing that I have noticed is the fact that they always have 2 women on the poster and other marketing material, leading audiences to speculate which of the beautiful women the leading man will end up with. This concept isn't unique to Bond though. Check out this poster from the Aardman film, The Pirates: An Adventure with Scientists. Here you can see the male protagonist, Hugh Grant's pirate captain, with 2 female pirates either side of him. This allows observers to infer that not only are these 3 characters the most prominent in the film, but that, from the fact they are both linking arms with him, they are both romantically involved with him in some way. In reality, these are minor background characters with few lines, and it makes little sense to feature them here. His main sidekicks are Number 2 and Charles Darwin, and the most important female character is Queen Victoria, the main antagonist, all of whom are much smaller on the poster. This means that this template is so prevalent that it has been used here either to parody generic action movie posters or to help the audience pigeonhole a movie that is far from generic. The point is, viewers often know that, not only but especially in Bond films, the protagonist will end up with either of the 2 women prominently featured in the marketing material. Whilst most of the posters for Skyfall just featured Craig, other marketing material that included other characters featured Naomi Harris's Eve and Berenice Marlowe's Severine. The juxtaposition of their glamorous evening wear and more practical clothing respectively remind me of the marketing for Tomorrow Never Dies, The World's Not Enough and Die Another Day, all of which are films where he ends up with the more practically dressed action heroine of the 2. So, this not only initiates speculation of casual audiences, but may encourage more serious fans of the franchise to guess based on the established tropes. It's also worth mentioning that the Craig era is a revisionist origin story for the character, which has already subverted the franchise's formula and has slowly reintroduced them, such as having 2 films without Q, before reintroducing a reinvented version of him for the modern age. In the interviews in the run-up to the release, Berenice Marlowe talked in detail about how she developed her character by watching performances of villainous women from the franchise, such as Mayday, Xenia Onatop and Fatima Blush, as well as villain performances such as Heath Ledger's Joker and the mythological Chimera. She also reignited the debate over whether the franchise's women should be referred to as Bond girls or Bond women. As there always is with conversations about popular franchises and political correctness, there are many opinion pieces and conversations on social media about this. To those reading these interviews, Severine promised to be a fascinating, multifaceted character with a depth that had never been seen before in the franchise. And when that's a franchise that includes characters like Vesper, Electra and Tracy, fans' expectations are very high. Now, onto the film itself. The pre-title sequence features Eve, played by Naomi Harris, as a fellow agent on Bond's mission. Bond girls in the pre-title sequence don't usually turn up later in the film, as more prominent female characters, especially the main sidekick, are introduced much later. They're also not usually acquainted with Bond when we first meet them, let alone have an established workplace banter. Eve is portrayed as a fellow agent who, whilst not frustratingly incompetent, cannot handle the pressures of the field, hesitating multiple times. This is certainly a departure from previous entries in the series, in which all major female agents, following Britt Ekland's Mary Goodnight, have been portrayed as Bond's equals. While you could therefore view this as a regression, I think that this is a really interesting character flaw. I think sometimes when we watch these films, despite the fact that we are amazed by stunts and fight sequences, we forget how difficult this job must be physically and mentally. If you watch this scene on the official YouTube channel, the comments are full of people thinking they have spotted so-called plot holes. Why doesn't Eve just shoot Patrice after she shoots Bond? Well, Eve is in shock. If you accidentally killed a colleague at work, would you continue using the photocopier? It's a great reminder that nobody does it better than Bond when we see a fellow agent struggling, other than the nameless enemy henchmen succumbing to Bond. So it's really nice to be able to have this comparison. Think of this line.
Every now and then a trigger has to be pulled.
Or not pulled. It's hard to know which in your pyjamas.
In a film about whether or not Bond and espionage itself is outdated, we really need this as a viewer to remind us how necessary these agents are and how difficult a good agent is to find. As to that agent being a black woman, I don't have a problem with it. I know some did, such as Monica Castillo from Bitch Media, but to me, her gender feels very much incidental. While I don't think the portrayal of previous female agents has overdone it by trying too hard and making them totally invincible, I can't help but feel refreshed to have a more flawed agent. Again, it's not as if she's incompetent. In fact, she's generally shown to be incredibly capable. How many people can swerve out of the way of falling VW Beetles and still stay on the road whilst chasing a train? She's just not able to work effectively under the pressure of the field. As for her ethnicity, well, she's probably just one of the many British actresses who auditioned for the role and she was the best. Besides, she was already in one of the most financially successful film franchises of all time, so it was probably a great move for publicity reasons. There have already been at least 2 fantastic agents of colour in the franchise in Waylon and Jinx. Then again, many people are just going to analyse these gender and race dynamics in the context of this movie, rather than the context of a franchise, other than the preconception of its legacy. We next see Eve on suspension from active duty after Bond returns to MI6, working for Mallory, the chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament, played by Ralph Fiennes. Mallory is here to encourage M to resign, symbolising the future both M and Bond are refusing to accept due to their reluctance to let go of the past. After Bond's altercation with an enemy assassin, we get our introduction to Severine, played by French actress Bérénice Marlowe. She stands alone after everyone else has abandoned the room, her hair billowing in the breeze from the window shattered by the assassin's bullet. Who is this woman who stares down a killer? Who is the woman who looks so calm in the presence of death? What is she feeling? All of these questions run through our minds in a single haunting shot that simply oozes intrigue and danger. Once Bond returns to his hotel in Macau, we encounter Eve, who has been sent there by Mallory. In this scene, Eve acts as a bridge between the old and the new, the film's thematic conflict, by being an ally of both Bond and Mallory. The main theme is stated multiple times in this scene.
Well, I like to do some things the old-fashioned way.
Sometimes the old ways are the best.
Old dog. New tricks.
The fact that this debate adds a layer of sexual tension only makes it more engaging. Bond meets Severine in a Macau casino, leading to one of the many outstanding dialogue scenes in this film. Her attempt to appear calm and threatening slowly cracks, revealing the fear underneath, as Bond reads her the way he and Vesper read each other when they first met in Casino Royale. You get the sense that Severine is out of the frying pan and into the fire, as her fear of Silver is like nothing she and Bond have ever known. And when that frying pan is being a child sex slave, then we can only imagine how horrifying the fire is. By the end of this scene, we are fascinated by Severine, and we want Bond to save her. Severine is far from the first kept woman in the series. All of the franchise's kept women are successfully liberated by Bond from the main antagonist, with the exception being Scaramanga's lover, Andrea Anders, in The Man with the Golden Gun. Therefore, the audience presumes that Severine is not the sacrificial lamb. After all, if Bond is supposed to be the ultimate male fantasy, as so many people perceive him to be, we're supposed to watch him save the damsel in distress in this feel-good action romp, right? Whilst this is not the focus of the video, I think it would be unwise to omit that Bond's seduction of Severine, especially him joining her in the shower unannounced, and whether or not this sex is a transaction for the killing of Silver, is a controversial aspect of this film. So much so that the director of National Sexual Violence Resource Center in the United States made a statement on it. However, I think this is more relevant to a future video series I'm working on, in which I'll be able to give it the focus it deserves. So, Severine is killed in a sadistic game of William Tell between Bond and Silver, quickly leaving her out of the running for the main Bond girl. So, if Eve isn't the main Bond girl, and Severine isn't the main Bond girl, who is? Judi Dench's M.
If the Bond girl is defined by the strong and intimate relationship she develops with Bond, then it is M and not Moneypenny or Severine who meets this criteria. She is the woman that Bond loves the most. This is evident in his desire to protect her from Silva.
In the previous scene, we've learned what the villain's motivation is: revenge on M. Silva is a former agent who feels betrayed after years of M's manipulation. Whilst M was clearly the main target, as her laptop was hacked multiple times, this establishes that this is not simply because she is the head of MI6, but because the main villain has a personal vendetta against her. In fact, she is actually a second protagonist in this film, going through a parallel character arc as both she and Bond struggle to let go of the past. If you're still not sure what I'm talking about here, then I highly recommend watching Class Act's video essay examining the structure of Skyfall, which I will link to in the description. Whilst there have, of course, been several male and female allies with their own B stories in the franchise, there has certainly never been a second protagonist. This certainly makes her the most important female character in the film. It's also interesting to see a film where it is the villain getting the revenge rather than an ally, such as a major Bond girl getting revenge on the villain, which we have seen in plenty of other Bond films. She's also the reason romantic love is replaced with pseudo-maternal love in Skyfall.
While the Brosnan films reference M's biological children, the Craig-era films increasingly depict Bond as her symbolic son, especially when it becomes clear that she's widowed and estranged from her children. This is most evident in Skyfall, where the conflict between Bond and Silva is framed in fraternal or brotherly terms. The pair seem to compete for the affections of their surrogate mummy, M.
So, instead of Bond and Silva competing for the sexual or romantic affection of a woman, they are competing over a mother figure and have more of a fraternal relationship. M is the third woman to die in Bond's arms at the end of a film. Whilst the sacrificial lamb trope happens in many films, these are almost always secondary Bond girls rather than the primary sidekick. The only two other women to die in Bond's arms at the end of films are Tracy DiVincenzo and Vesper Lynd, two characters who are seen as Bond's only true loves. Well, until Spectre. By directly comparing her to these women, M is shown not only to be a major female presence in Bond's life, but the one who this Bond loves as much as Vesper, and the previous continuity's Bond loved as much as Tracy. And finally, we have the big reveal that Eve's surname is in fact Moneypenny, bringing back a second beloved character that fans haven't seen for 10 years. It's an interesting character in today's social landscape. Whilst their flirtation and interest in each other has always been portrayed as pretty mutual in the series, There is now a question of whether or not it is a good idea to portray idealised workplace flirtation in a world in which people are so conscious of the issues of sexual harassment and men taking advantage of uncomfortable power dynamics in the workplace. Personally, I think that Brosnan's Moneypenny, played by the appropriately named Samantha Bond, already proved that this could work.
You always were a cunning linguist, James.
But maybe they decided a friendship established when they were agents on equal footing would be more appropriate. Nevertheless, this is a fascinating backstory for a beloved character, and it works surprisingly well. This scene is actually a good twist reveal of an established character in a reboot. If you had never seen a James Bond film, you would just be missing out on a little fan service rather than something that's supposed to be some major plot twist. These things should be able to stand on their own, especially in a rebooted franchise in which these names mean nothing to a new audience. And so, instead of ending with the final hurrah of Bond in bed with a woman, which the Craig continuity actually never did, we end with Bond accepting this new world. With 3 new MI6 regulars, reminiscent of the original films, ready for good old-fashioned mission-based plots. Until Spectre gave us another personal revenge story. Have you seen Skyfall? What's your favourite Craig film? Where do you think the franchise should go next? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you want me to make more content like this, you can let me know by liking the video. Once again, I am planning on doing a much longer series on women in the James Bond franchise. So, if you want to be the first to watch them, consider subscribing. Is there anything in particular that you'd love to see me cover in that series? I'd love to read your suggestions in the comments. This is actually my second video about the franchise, with the first being how the pre-title sequence of For Your Eyes Only undermines the rest of the movie. If you want to watch any of the videos I've referenced in this essay, all of the links are in the description. If you like this video, you can like, subscribe and share it with your friends, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. I recommend Calvin Dyson's video about how emotional storytelling has changed the franchise, especially in the Craig era. If you haven't dived into the Bond community on YouTube, his channel is a great place to start. If you want to listen to more analysis about the role of women in the franchise, I highly recommend listening to David Zaritsky's interview with Dr. Lisa Funnell, a university lecturer who has written many papers on women in the Bond films and other action movies. She also has a podcast, but I think this video is good if you want an overview of her opinions on what she writes about. The 4th episode of her podcast, License Critique, is all about reworking the Bond girl concept in the Daniel Craig era, so that's a good one to listen to hear another critical perspective about the women of Skyfall. The Bitch Media article by Mona Castillo I referenced in this essay is an interesting read. Personally, it felt like a CinemaSin counter of everything that could be considered controversial, with no knowledge of the context of either the franchise or the context behind the movie. For example, the question of whether or not it is currently appropriate to queer code villains is a perfectly appropriate conversation, but condemning it with the assumption that those behind this decision were heterosexual, when, for the record, they weren't, doesn't do the author any favours. It's like calling Howard Ashman a homophobe for recommending Divine as the inspiration for Ursula. Again, I'm not discussing the implications of queer coding villains, but you need to make an effort to understand the context first. So yes, not an opinion I agree with it by any means, but it was still interesting for me to see how some viewers will see this with no knowledge of the franchise. Let me know if you want me to talk more about why I disagree with this article in a future video. Anyway, I need to go. I have an unexplained thirst for Heineken right now. See you soon!
Hey! And you don't die right away. You kinda just